Welcome to Why Don't We Dress for Dinner Anymore with host Teddi Krochman, a senior style icon.
And Melissa Pierce, documentarian and entrepreneur. If you notice, today we have our official Get Dressed for Dinner. Why didn't we get dressed for dinner anymore mugs?
That's how you know we're serious.
Right.
We bought our own swag.
We got our own swag. Yeah, there you go. So, today we want to talk a little bit more so that all of you get to know what's on the brains of the two co-hosts of Why Don't We Dress for Dinner Anymore, a podcast that focuses not so much on what are the latest styles and trends, but the psychology of why we dress and how what it communicates to others, etc., etc. The place of fashion in history, all those kind of good topics. So that being said, Melissa, one of the things that I wanted to discuss today was this fabulous documentary that I'm watching on Hulu called In Vogue, the 90s. Now, we both lived through the 90s, but in different age groups. Melissa was obviously in her teens and early 20s. Well, not obviously, but that's what she was in. All right, it's not so obvious, but that's what she was in. She was actually in kindergarten, but she was like 17. But anyway.
Right.
And so that we could say that was really your era because, we always kind of revert back to the time when we were blossoming. We're becoming adults. We're in our late teens and our early 20s. That's when we're experimenting with clothes and all kinds of different things. So I would say, Melissa, the 90s was an important, memorable era for you.
Right. I think that's true. And I always have this theory when I'm like, oh, that person peaked in high school, I can always tell because I notice they're wearing what was cool when they were in high school.
Right. They don't change. Or they got the same hairdo for, 30 years later. You see them with the same do. And so for Melissa, the 90s was really important. Of course, I lived through the 90s, but in the 90s, I was in my late 30s, early 40s. So for me, it was a whole different phase of life.
Oh, sure.
What I found striking, though, Melissa, was when I watched this documentary, and we've talked briefly on other podcasts about the 70s and how the 70s started out as kind of a rebellion against everything that was happening in society, civil rights, women's rights, gay rights, all kinds of things like that. And we kind of were wearing no bras, the freedom of no bras, free love, bell-bottom pants, halter tops, kind of what we describe as boho chic now.
Right.
And then what happened as we headed towards the mid-70s, the music changed. It was disco. It called for more intimate kinds of dancing. It wasn't as much of the free style dancing that we still do now, but we were doing the salsa. There was all these disco dances that we were learning together, line dances and that kind of thing. And the fashion Studio 54 and the fashions became again more glamorous. Well, when I watched this Hulu documentary, and I've only watched the first 3 episodes because the second 3 episodes are airing on Thursday. By the time all of you see this podcast, you could probably watch the whole 6 episodes on Hulu. But what struck me is, and I didn't even realize this, is that the 90s really kind of mimicked the same kind of pattern in fashion that the 70s did, only in its own style.
Yeah.
So the early 90s was more of a rebellion against we were in a recession, so people didn't have a lot of money to spend on designer clothes and things like that. Madonna was huge. Madonna was kind of thrift store looking, million bracelets and all kinds of mixed patterns and clothes and things that didn't look, like she was wearing, Yves Saint Laurent.
Right, she was wearing her underwear on the outside.
Right.
I remember my mom was shocked.
Yeah, her bra on the outside.
That's
right. So we kind of moved, and it started in London, the way it was explained, that it was a revolt against the glamorous fashion of the 80s where everything was over the top, the big earrings, the big hair, the
Big
big
shoulders.
show, everything was big.
Yeah.
And so we went into the grunge period where the guys were wearing their pants down and their underwear was sticking out. And the models, the supermodels were still around, but they were kind of feeling like they were being replaced by Kate Moss,
Who is what, 5'6"?
5'6", which was on average 3 inches, if not more, shorter than Naomi, Cindy, Christy, Claudia, all the big ones that we know.
Supermodels, yeah.
Very thin, flat chested, where they were all more voluptuous. And we went into a period where it was named heroin chic. And so the look was very sparse. It was, a mixing of patterns. So we had designer dresses with flannel shirts over them. Women were wearing the Doc Martens with their dresses.
I wore Docs with everything.
Yes. Yeah. And so it was people in the streets. Your average person was actually the one dictating the style that eventually Vogue magazine's editor, Anna Wintour, had to capitulate to, because even though she personally did not like it, her creative director, Grace Coddington, did like it. And so she knew how to get around Anna, and she finally talked her into showing that kind of clothing on the pages of Vogue.
I don't think I was aware of that in the 90s.
Yeah.
Right. I didn't know that it was a big shift.
Yes.
Right. I was just dressing.
Right. Well, you were a kid.
All of my
your high school
high
friends.
school friends were dressing.
Right. So you didn't, and me, because I wasn't in high school. My son was, I think, 10 in the early 90s. So he was still dressing, whatever I would put on him, that kind of thing. So I didn't really, I knew grunge was out there, but I didn't absorb it as the cultural phenomenon that it really was. Yeah. So then they explained, going into the mid 90s, what happened was the supermodels were getting older, because the supermodels had then transitioned to be more like Kate Moss, and they kind of brought her into the fold, and they were doing, there was a very edgy fashion magazine in London called ID Magazine.
Oh,
and the signature, and the signature of the cover of ID Magazine was always a woman winking, so it was always the wink. And they had a lot of the grunge styles in there. And so Linda Evangelista changed her.
You got to do your best grunge style wink for the camera.
Okay, here's, if I was going to be on ID Magazine, this would be the wink I do. And you know what they said that was very interesting in this documentary? They said, we had such a hard time shooting the cover because every model had to wink, and they realized that most people don't know how to wink. So it was really hard to get that damn wink. But anyway, so Linda Evangelista changed her hair. She went more grungy. They were all kind of doing the wet hair look, the grungy kind of looks, and they liked it. They really enjoyed it. But as they were getting older, they're growing out of clothes that are more for teens and youth. They were getting into their later 20s now. And along comes Tom Ford, who became the head of Gucci.
Yeah.
And when he first did his first show, it stunk. Nobody liked it. They thought it was too blah. They said, oh, this is terrible, blah, blah, blah. So he was desperate. He was like, what should I do? And he remembered that he was old enough to remember the very end of Studio 54 and had actually gone there as a young man. And so he thought, what if I take some stuff, take my influence from the 70s, but do it even more glam, not as much glitter and that kind of thing, but like a kind of a sophisticated glam that's influenced by the 70s. So I remember this. I remember this. I loved Tom Ford's line for Gucci in the mid to late 90s. He was a phenomenon. And he had brought out these hip hugger pants, kind of like we wore in the 70s, but they were velvet, and they had satin shirts, and they had the bigger, kind of almost the hair wasn't really 70s from what I recall how we were here, but it was more like, I would say more 60s actually, with the big kind of bouffant with the headband and the big hair kind of a thing, right? And he was a smash hit. People went crazy for Tom Ford. And what really brought him over the top was MTV was really huge in the 90s. Everybody was watching MTV. And Madonna was a presenter on the MTV Awards.
Oh, I remember none of this. Come on.
Yes, and she came out wearing one of Tom Ford's satin shirts and the hip hugger pants. She had the big hair, which was obviously a piece in there, and and people went crazy. He said the minute Madonna went on that MTV show, he could not keep up with the phone calls for appointments to come to Gucci.
I forget what a style icon Madonna was.
Oh yeah.
And
she was it.
The 80s and the early 90s.
She was the influence. Anything she touched became it. It became the style. Yeah. This was interesting. They interviewed, a lot of different people in this documentary, and it makes it interesting. But one of the people was interesting that they interviewed was Kim Kardashian, who's just a little bit younger than you. Kim's probably about 44 right now. And she said,
"You were just spilling my tea
there
to everyone on our podcast."
Oh, hell. Listen, compared to me, everybody's young. I'm like Methuselah here. But Kim Kardashian, believe it or not, she was the dog walker for Madonna, lived right next door to her. So Kim was the dog walker for Madonna. And one day, Kim goes to go walk Madonna's dogs, and Madonna brings out this big box, and she says, "Here," and her sister Courtney was with her. "Do you want these rubber bracelets? Because I'm kind of done with these things. I don't want to wear them anymore." And of course, Kim was like, "Yes, absolutely." So the next day, her and Courtney go to school with these big, rubbery bracelets all up and down their arms, and the kids are saying to them, "Where'd you girls get those bracelets?" And she said, "Madonna." And they're all going, "Oh, get out of here, Madonna." She says, "No, really, I'm Madonna's dog walker." And she gave them to me. And she says, "We wore those bangles like the biggest badge of honor. Everybody was just dying because anything that Madonna touched turned to gold."
Wait, like the jelly bracelets?
Yes.
The jelly bracelets from
yes.
my middle school era.
Yes.
Big deal.
Gave her a whole box of them.
Holy moly.
And they were from her. And so her and Courtney were walking around with these piles of rubber bracelets. Then, moving more into the designer direction, here comes Madonna, and she does a concert. I believe this was in the mid to later 90s, where she did that whole kind of S&M look that Jean-Paul Gaultier designed for her, with the big cone bra and the kind of straps all over everything.
I will tell you, he was such a big influence in my fashion.
Really?
From watching, I think, The Fifth Element, which he designed all of the costumes
really?
for.
I was not aware of that.
I loved that movie so much. Well, it had Mila Jovovich in it.
Yes, well, she was the top model.
Right?
Yeah.
I just thought we were going to be best friends.
Oh, wow.
And
I gotta go rewatch that movie.
I mean, I'll watch it with you. I've seen it like hundreds of times.
Well, I gotta rewatch that. I know I've seen it. I have like zero memory for movies. Once I watch a movie, I could watch it again like 2 weeks later and I'll forget what the ending is. So I have no memory.
Whereas my partner can recall the entire
Ken too.
Well, maybe we've outsourced that kind of memory.
Maybe we depend on Ken will actually watch a movie and he'll remember he'll say a line and he'll go, "This line is coming up next." I go, "You can't. You've seen that movie one time," and he'll say the line, and all of a sudden the line will come up in the movie.
Right? Do you think this is why men are so emotionally stunted, because their brain
is filled with junk,
full of media?
I never thought of that. That is a really good point.
I know I'm totally throwing us off topic, but
that's a conversation. You want to know something, and it's interesting because Ken knows. I could watch a movie a million times. I forget the endings. I forget what happens. And he remembers everything. And I remember we were having this conversation. And you know what he said to me? He said, "Your brain is probably so efficient that it wipes out superficial stuff so that you have enough room for the important stuff." And I thought that was such a nice thing for him to
Right?
say.
And that's why you've been married 50 years. He can totally blow that smoke super far.
Right up there, man.
Up there.
Right up there.
Right. And it works.
Yeah. Because I thought,
also.
wow, you made me sound so much more intelligent than I feel, because I feel like a big dope. I can't remember any. I could watch a movie literally, I could watch a movie 5 times and I'll still forget the ending. You know, I mean, I've literally got to watch a movie maybe 10 times or so, and then I'll start to remember things. There's one movie, and we've totally gotten off topic now, but I have to, as long as we're talking about movie memory. When I was 19, the movie The Way We Were came out with Barbara Streisand, and Robert Redford.
Mm-hmm.
I literally have seen that movie 100 times.
How does it end?
I even saw it in Greece. Oh my gosh.
How does it end?
It ends with her going like this to his forehead and pushing his little bangs that fell in his face away. And she says to him, I forgot. It'll come back. It'll come back. She said, don't worry, Hubble. Something Hubble. But it's the most like touching, because they're divorced at this point.
Yeah.
And they see each other and there's still that attraction, but that was just that. Right. I guess, you know, there's some couples that just have that magnetic attraction, but they just can't live together. And that was the whole story of The Way We Were, is they were really attracted to each other and they really did love each other, but there was just 2 different lifestyles in there, and neither one of them was willing to give up their lifestyle for the other, which you shouldn't have to.
Right. It's a little bit like The Marriage Story.
Yeah.
I mean, all of these
yeah, but it was the early 70s. Don't forget that movie came out. I was like literally 18 years old when that movie came out.
My mom was so into Barbara Streisand movies. I thought we were Jewish for so long. Right? Every Barbara Streisand movie playing on VHS.
Yes.
Also Fiddler on the Roof. I knew more about like the Jewish religion than any other one.
Oh, I love Fiddler on the Roof. That's another one I've probably seen that at least 30 times. Right. But you want to know how many times? So I saw The Way We Were literally over 100 times. I had gone on a vacation with my cousin to Greece when we were like 19, or I was like 19 or 20. And they had an outdoor show where they had a big screen and you could like have a little picnic and you watch the movie, right? So we decide to, you know, go to the movie, and we're having the picnic, and what movie comes on? The Way We Were. It was unfreaking believable. I was in Greece and it was The Way We Were.
Was it dubbed?
They had subtitles.
Oh, it wasn't dubbed.
It had Greek subtitles and we heard it in English. So it was fabulous. I was like, this movie is just following me everywhere I go.
Did I tell you this? I finally saw a Godzilla movie in the original Japanese.
No.
And instead of an overdub, it was in the
because I've always seen dubbed versions.
I've always seen the dubbed ones, and I was like, oh, these are so stupid.
Yeah.
I saw it in the original Japanese with just subtitles. And I was like, holy crap, the timing is so good. This movie is brilliant.
Well, think of how many times it's been remade. There must be something to it.
Oh, right. Well, I just thought it was fun because everyone got to dress up, right?
Yeah.
Big puppets.
Yeah.
Costumes. But no, the timing is incredible.
Yeah.
And I was like, oh, this is where Wes Anderson gets everything. It's from Godzilla movies.
You think so?
Holy moly.
So, okay, now my brain is not absorbing this. So you need to like bring this down a level
work
to
on
me.
Your neuroplasticity. I'm keeping that snort in there.
I do snort when I laugh. I'm sorry. My neuroplasticity. All right. So explain this to me. Now we've totally skipped. We'll come back to vote. But anyway, I love Wes Anderson. First, let me preface that. I love Royal Tannenbaums. I love the Grand Budapest Hotel. Mm-hmm. I love almost all of it.
Yeah.
Okay, so I see no relationship to Godzilla and Wes Anderson. So tell me.
All right. You know how Wes Anderson, he has a color palette in every
Yes, it looks almost cartoonish.
Yeah. Well, Godzilla also has this. If you watch them, you will see every scene, every set has its own particular color palette, and none of even their costumes fall out of that. Right? And then there's this deadpan delivery.
Yeah.
which also happens in Japanese. And we think it's unique to Wes Anderson because that's not how Americans
people talk. Right.
But when you hear it in Japanese, oh, that is the delivery. That is how the delivery is done.
In Japanese language, in the Japanese language.
So it was that same, and even the cutscenes are very similar.
Really?
So now I'm like, could I take any film?
Yeah.
Pull it apart and cut it like Godzilla, and would it look more like a Wes Anderson film? I'm so, because
that's interesting. I gotta go see an original, because I've never, even when I was a little kid, they played Godzilla, on TV,
dubbed.
But it was always dubbed, which we'd make fun of. In fact, Woody Allen for all of you movie fans out there, Woody Allen made a picture called "What's Up, Tiger Lily," and it's actually a mimic of dubbed Japanese movies. So it actually is called "What's Up, Tiger Lily." The whole thing is dubbed in English, and they're supposedly talking Japanese, right? And it's all about finding the secret egg salad sandwich.
Oh gosh.
The secret egg salad recipe. And it is hysterical because all of the goofy dubbing that they used to do in the 50s, it was terrible. Now they've gotten so good at it with computers that even with the dubbing, the mouths almost look like they're saying the same words. But back in the 50s, there's the lips going like this. And the guy's going, "How are you doing?" And there's no syncing of the lips and the dubbing whatsoever. I mean, it's just goofy. So Woody Allen made an entire movie where the dubbing is not syncing with the lips at all. And it's basically like a Japanese dub movie.
I really need to move away from documentaries if I'm going to have any fun. That's
what
you're telling me.
Yeah, it's a good one. What's Up, Tiger Lily? Remember that. It's a Woody Allen movie.
All right. Well, now we've gone to our alternative podcast, which is all about film. Welcome everyone to All About Film with
Roger and Ebert. Rajetta and Eberbetta.
Okay, so you're watching this documentary. You realize that the 70s are just like the 90s.
Really? They mirrored each other. I would say they weren't just like each other, but the historical content is almost a mirror image. Rebellion at the beginning, growing up at the end, free kind of clothing, more street style, more influenced by the people than by the fashion houses. And then towards the end of the decade, more influenced by the fashion houses than by the people.
People are still trying to capture that Tom Ford look of Gucci. That's like so signature to
Gucci.
Oh
my God, I used to love him.
Yeah, I would be remiss not to mention that these things also, these fashion trends repeat because in the mid 60s, early 70s, the fashion houses started to consolidate.
Yes. And they were selling out to bigger companies
so fashion then began to be run like a corporation.
Yes.
And they're just selling what sells.
Exactly. What's commercial.
What the creative wants to make. And so that's why we are now seeing more cycles. So the 90s could have been that first kind of cycle.
Exactly.
Although I would like to think that in 1992, when I was cutting the waistband off of my jeans,
and the holes in the jeans,
and the holes, the holes in the jeans, cutting the waistbands off of my jeans, that I was inventing something.
Yes,
but I was obviously already influenced by whatever was happening in 1993, and now I have to go back and see if that was happening in Vogue magazine before I did that.
It was because they said they started publishing, I think, the grunge look around 92, 93.
So it was in that time, and how much of it was, MTV, which I watched all of the time when it was just music videos all of the time.
And then don't forget, you had Kurt Cobain, and his wife,
Courtney
Love,
right?
Huge. If now you're coming out of Seattle with not only the grunge look, but the what was the kind of music that they played? I always forget.
It's called grunge music.
Was it grunge music?
Yeah, okay.
Grunge music, so grunge music. And so they were a huge influence in the States because that was a hugely popular band. So you had rock and roll, which always influences fashion to me.
Right.
Music, Elvis, the whole thing, influenced fashion. So you had that coming out of Seattle in the States. coming to us from London, exactly like in the 70s where we had first the Carnaby Street look coming from London, another street kind of style
what's
look.
What's the Carnaby Street look?
Carnaby style was when the Beatles first came out in the mid-60s. There was another huge London fashion explosion, which was the mini skirt with tights, Twiggy.
Okay, Twiggy.
The hats, we used to call them jockey hats. John Lennon started wearing them, and then the girls started copying that. We had the hip hugger skirts,
all right,
the white go-go boots, the white lipstick. All that was Carnaby Street.
Okay.
There was even a cosmetics company in London called Yardley, and they were huge in the United States. Everybody wanted Yardley perfume, Yardley cosmetics. We wear the white eyeshadow, the big liner. So that was kind of more of a glamour look that did come from Carnaby Street, which was not a high-end fashion street, which was more vintage, again, looks and street looks and that kind of thing. So that became kind of the streetwear of the 60s coming to us from the Beatle explosion. Right. And then as we transitioned into the 70s and there was all the civil rights movement, the clothes got looser, the bras came off, the pants dropped and were more hip hugger.
And just in case anyone hasn't figured it out, the 70s is Teddi's favorite era for fashion. And she has described this era as the era of rebels.
Yeah.
So Teddi, Rebel Teddi.
I'm rebel without a cause.
Right. No, Teddi's like, I grew up real nice. I had no cause.
I had no cause. I just love fashion. Although today I am wearing, just so all of you know, a Diane von Furstenberg wrap dress as an homage to the 70s, because I figure I represent the 70s. Melissa represents the 90s. So I kind of wore my DVF wrap dress, which this dress alone is probably over 25 years old. But I was working at Marshall Field's, I remember, in the early 70s when the wrap dress first came out, and I had like 5 of them. I mean, they were so popular, it just went right through the roof. So you want to talk about somebody who came up with another fashion idea that was a total explosion because it was one and done dressing. Perfect. All you had to do was put this dress on and you looked chic, and pretty much that was it. So I thought I'd represent the 70s with my little Diane von Furstenberg wrap dress, because shout out to Diane. She was huge in the 70s, huge.
She's got a great pattern.
Yeah. And most of her DVF wraps were patterns. There were very few of them. I can't remember any that were solids. She might have had some, but they were mainly in prints. So transitioning, could we transition off?
Yeah, let's stop.
But if, like I said, I do recommend that Hulu. It's called In Vogue the 90s. It's really good. You'll learn a lot about the psychology of fashion and how we transition and how fashion is a reflection of what's going on in society. And sometimes fashion influences the movement of how society dresses. So it's kind of synergistic, I'd say.
Right. Oh, there's one point I want to make.
Yeah.
Because I lived in Germany from 1989 to 1992.
Okay.
And in 1989 is when the wall came down.
Right.
And all the Eastern Germans came over with their style, which was not influenced by a lot of Western.
Right, because they couldn't.
Hadn't seen it. But that was like during the time of punk in Germany.
Punk. That's it. Punk rock, they called it. Yeah.
Oh, you're thinking of
punk rock. Okay. Punk rock. There it was. Yeah.
So there was a big punk influence in Germany, and all of these Eastern Germans came over, and they, of course, didn't have this. They had it like totally different aesthetics that blended with this punk scene. So I think about that as far as grunge developed in a particular way.
Yeah.
But I know for me, you watch these Eastern Germans moving about town, they look totally different. And I immediately wanted to go vintage shopping and find my grandfather's vest to wear with whatever cool go-go thing I had also found with a pair of jeans, because, in the 90s, jeans were still the thing.
Right.
Jeans,
right.
So I do want to point that out in the events that are happening. That was a big thing that happened, was that there was a culture that was totally cut off.
Right. From the modern world.
From the modern world.
They were just in their own little cocoon there.
Right. And so those cultures just crossed.
Yes.
In the early 90s.
Yes.
And it was pretty wide in Europe.
And you think about it, going back to that grunge look, it was really the odd juxtaposition of the clothes. Like I said, one of the first shoots that they had with a grunge look, Grace Coddington took this designer like slip dress and she threw a flannel shirt over the model and put her in Doc Martens. So you had the juxtaposition of this high fashion designer slip dress with a plain old flannel shirt that you could probably have bought at Sears at the time. Pure Doc Martens, which, you know, you would expect if you're wearing a designer dress, you're going to be wearing heels or something like that. So you take these, you know, utilitarian looking boots and you've got the juxtaposition of something that's very elegant with something that's very kind of work looking.
And here I think I invented this for myself in my teens. And now I've got to go look and see, like, when did Vogue put these things out?
Yeah.
When was I seeing them on MTV?
In the early 90s.
When did I start wearing cocktail dresses with my green Doc Martens?
Right.
Was that, did I help influence something?
Yes.
Or was I influenced?
Well, I think all the kids were kind of just experimenting with different things all together. And what happened was the fashion world stole from that and kind of...
I mean, that's what happens. I mean, that's what even happened with the word cool, right? The Black community used the word cool to explain something. And then, like, the corporate America came to try to figure out how to commodify.
Right. And they capture it.
Yeah.
And they commercialize it. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
So what I'd like to transition to, because you had sent me a very interesting article.
Yeah. Other interesting things about fashion.
Melissa sent me this article about hats and why we don't wear hats anymore. So I learned a lot of really neat things that I never knew before. One of the things that I already knew about our lack of wearing hats anymore was the influence of the Kennedys. Jackie Kennedy, from what I had read, now I'm not disparaging Jackie because she's one of my fashion icons. Jackie Kennedy, are you going to put that thing on me? Jackie Kennedy, you goofball. You're putting it on me, right? Jackie Kennedy, for those of you who can't see what we're doing, we're putting on these hats that I had sitting around the house. I don't know where I got this hat. Honest to God.
You know what? I feel like Annie Hall with this one.
That one, I actually was influenced by George O'Keeffe. That's a, that's very cute on you.
I'm happy. I've got a head for hats.
You do. What do they call those? I can't remember. I'll think of the name of that. But anyway, let me go back to my Jackie Kennedy story while I'm getting my hat on. So anyway, it's time for it.
You look like you're going to bet on a horse.
Yeah. Well, this is what I bought it for. I bought it for the $1 million race at Arlington Heights when we used to have race track. So anyway, Jackie Kennedy had this huge melon head.
Jackie Kennedy with a melon head?
Jackie Kennedy had this huge melon head.
Now the title of this episode
is Jackie Kennedy and her melon head.
Jackie Kennedy and her melon head. All right.
So anyway, Jackie Kennedy had this huge melon head, and so did JFK. They did not, neither of them, like the way they looked in hats. So men up until the 60s were always wearing their fedora or their hat or whatever when they went to work. Yes, my husband, his dad, never left the house for work without his hat on. But when JFK came into office, they were such a young, attractive couple that, of course, they influenced the way people dress. And one of the things they influenced was the lack of hats, because Jackie hated the way she looked in hats. And in fact, Halston created the pillbox hat specifically for Jackie Kennedy. He was a milliner. Yes, he was a milliner at Bergdorf's at the time. And he created the pillbox hat specifically for Jackie to wear in the back of her, more towards the back of her head. So she didn't have to have a hat like this with a huge brim, because she said her head was so big that she just did not, she would have to have a brim out to here to cover her entire. So anyway, that is one of the reasons that we stopped wearing hats as a regular part of our everyday costume.
Because John Kennedy and Jackie Kennedy had melon heads.
Had melon heads.
They had melon heads, and they were
because of their head size. The rest of us have been deprived of wearing hats all these years.
Wait, however, it was also because we were getting in and out of cars,
right? That was another huge point. In the early 20s, you saw, if you watch old movies, you'll see cars. They had the big roofs, and they were pretty much like tanks coming down the street. Right. But as cars evolved, especially in the late 40s, early 50s, the roofs of the cars got smaller, and so people's hats would be knocked off, and it was becoming very inconvenient just to wear a hat in a car. I remember even when we were younger, we, like I said, we always used to wear Easter bonnets at Easter and that kind of thing. And I remember my mom kaboonging her a few times with the hat would fall, or sometimes she'd just have to take the hat off while she was in the car because the hat would be, up around the roof or whatever. The hat that you just had on, Melissa, I recently bought that on a trip to Santa Fe, New Mexico, and I actually bought that at the George O'Keeffe Museum. And that was influenced by a hat that the artist George O'Keeffe used to wear almost every day of her life.
Right. So you went into the museum, you saw every pineapple she ever painted. I have also been there.
I love George O'Keeffe. Yeah. I love it. And you know what I was surprised about? I did not get a chance to go.
I have tickets. It's the last week. Let's go.
Really? Oh, definitely. I haven't seen that show at all. And I really wanted to see it because that's her artwork when she was in New York, which is totally different than what the majority of us see, which is a lot of her Santa Fe, New Mexico stuff.
1 million colors of green.
Yes. Yeah. And what I was really shocked at when I went to that George O'Keeffe Museum was, there were two things. You're always expecting to see those flower pictures that she'd make, and everybody would say that they're vaginas and all that kind of stuff. And she would say, no, they're not. I'm just painting the flower or whatever. But there was not that many flower pictures. I was thinking I'm going to see all these flower pictures or the skulls and stuff like that. But there was a lot more variety in her paintings than I was even aware of. But again, the fashionista in me came out, and they had one of George O'Keeffe's outfits that she would wear on her ranch in Santa Fe, New Mexico. Of course, she had that hat on that Melissa was just wearing. That's I keep wanting to say it's influenced from South America. It's a gaucho hat. That's what it is. That's like a gaucho influence hat, because the cowboy hats had more of a brim that came down like this. The gauchos came straight out. And I was so influenced by her style. She had these great big belts that she'd wear and these long like skirts, and she'd have shawls on.
That's always how I imagined that I would dress once I got into my 60s.
Yeah. Oh, she looked fabulous. Even though she was this, she wasn't a particularly attractive woman, and, because of her being in the sun, for so many years in Santa Fe, her skin had become very wrinkled and everything like that. But yet she had such style and such presence that she looked beautiful to me. I just went like Georgia O'Keeffe crazy. I was like dressing. I was wearing that hat around town. I was just like being like a little Georgia O'Keeffe kind of a person. I do that sometimes when I see a look that I really am just taken with. I'll copy it and I'll wear it for a while. And then, of course, I'll, get tired of it. And
sure,
I think that hat's been collecting dust for like a year now.
Well, let me ask you then. I think this is a good thing to kind of add to rotation. Like, is there a fashion trend that is making you come alive lately? Is there something that you're seeing that you're like, ooh, I gotta try that?
Well, you want to know something? My adrenaline went from yesterday, probably a 2 to a 10 when I was watching that documentary series called In Vogue.
Right.
Because it brought to light a lot of fashion things that were happening in the 90s that I wasn't particularly paying that much attention to.
Because you were in your 30s, you were raising children. It's like a whole thing.
I was starting to go into the corporate world, so I'm wearing suits. I'm not paying attention to the grunge world. Like I said, my son was like 10, so he's still wearing, blue jeans and a t-shirt from Kohl's or whatever.
Still in Oshkosh, Bagosh.
Yeah. So I really wasn't paying that much attention to it. I glance at it every now and then. But from watching that, whenever I watch these fashion shows that really, really interest me, right away I start going and looking in my closet to try to mimic those looks. Like, where do I have a satin blouse? I need a satin blouse like Gucci. I need to find some low slung pants. I need to, it's like, it just gets you all invigorated to kind of even mimic some of the looks of that time, because you realize, wow, it was really a gorgeous period of clothes during that time. Yeah. And I didn't realize it as much as when it was laid out in front of me kind of in a timeline yesterday. So I have to say, I was really invigorated by that show. That got me like, I want to style things. I want to change my style again. I want to go to more shirts that are kind of open and then low slung belts. And I was just looking at all those really rich Tom Ford looks. And I was like, just like almost shaking. I was like, I was taking notes, writing things down. What? Oh yeah. I get so into it. I can't even tell you. So yeah, I would say that I want to like look at some of those late 90s looks and try to do some of that for myself. Of course, make it a more modern day version. I'm not going to mimic it exactly, but sometimes I get influenced by certain time frames. And that's why one of my favorite questions to ask our guests is, what's their favorite era or eras in fashion? Because it kind of tells me about the person themselves, kind of what's their aesthetic. What do they gravitate towards? Is it more, sleek, sophisticated looks? Is it more pop culture looks? Is it like Joanna last week, who we were talking to, who said she loves it all? She can't even nail down her style because she just loves it all.
Although she gave me so much Betsy Johnson.
Yeah.
During our interview.
Yeah.
Just like fresh and fun. Yeah. Vibrant.
Yeah. You could.
For anything.
Yeah. That's probably the period she's going through right now is, kind of the last gasps of, I'm young, I'm beautiful, I can still pull it off.
Last gasp.
It's the last gasp.
Beautiful.
She will be, but she'll be in more of and don't forget, Joanna is in her mid 40s.
Right.
So, when you're in your 40s like you are,
again,
you still look young and beautiful, and you can carry off some of those younger looks. As you get older, I would say probably around your mid 50s, you notice a little shift in your appearance, and again, it depends on how well you take care of yourself. Everybody's dependent on that. And I would say that while there's not a lot that I won't wear, even now at the age of almost 71, I'm not going to be wearing quote unquote street style. Like, I have a friend who's a great designer, but all her clothes are influenced by hip hop street style kind of wear, which I just not going to look good in the backwards, trucker hat and the long shirt. And, I'm going to look like
that oversized stuff.
Yeah.
You're already petite.
And I'm small, so it's going to swallow me up.
Yeah.
But second of all, there is a point where you can't wear what the kids are wearing anymore. I'm not going to dress like a teenager. I would look silly. Now, do I still wear dresses above my knee? Of course I do. But like I said in a previous episode, I'll wear hose because you got to watch those older knees a little bit.
And Joanna called them elephant knees.
Yes.
Are you getting the elephant
well,
knees?
your elbows, how they wrinkle because it's in a joint, and so the skin has to be extra large to pull.
Mine's starting to get weirdly knobby.
Yeah, your knees, the same thing happens because as you get older, you're losing collagen in your skin. So all that extra skin that was holding your whole knee joint together has no place to go, and so it ends up going in little folds. So you'll notice little folds in your knees. And that's why you'll notice that a lot of women in their 50s and 60s just gravitate towards pants. It's just easier for them. Or they'll wear a longer skirt, like I have on today, a longer skirt. But I will wear a shorter skirt still because I have damn good legs. I just have to stick them in stockings, that's all, because of my wrinkly knees, But you do transition. There will be a transitional point where, like in the 40s, I pretty much wore anything I wanted to. I was still wearing the ripped jeans, Because I looked really young.
In your 40s, because I just got so confused. I was like, in the 40s?
No, in my 40s. I wasn't alive in the 40s. I'm not that freaking old, man. All right. I'm from the early 50s. All right. There you go. But when I was in my 40s, yeah, everybody thought I was in my 30s. There was people were like aghast, when I would tell them I'm 45 or I'm 40. I remember I had a colleague who was about 10 years younger than me. She was about 35. And one day I mentioned my age and she looked at me. She says, "You got to be kidding me. I thought you were my age." I go, "No, honey, I'm 10 years older than you."
Hey.
So I've always tended to look a little bit younger than I actually
This is what I tell my daughter is she graduates and moves out into the college dorm. I'm just going to knock 10 years off my age.
Yeah, because nobody will know the difference.
Because they won't.
Yeah. Although there was a famous actress called Zsa Zsa Gabor. Do you remember Zsa Zsa Gabor? And this was funny. One night she was on the Johnny Carson show. And I still remember this because I was in my teens when I was watching it. And Johnny Carson asked Zsa Zsa, "What's your biggest beauty secret?" And you know what she said? "I tell everybody that I'm 10 years older than I am because then they'll always say how fantastic I look for my age." So Zsa Zsa's secret was if she was 60, she'd tell them she's 70. And they go, "You got to be kidding me. There's no way you're 70. Because she'd tell them she was 10 years older than she was. And I thought, this is kind of genius in a way.
I mean, I really need to get that.
Think about it. If I tell people that I'm 80, if I told you come on, look at me, gang. If I told you I'm 80 years old, would you say this woman needs to be in the Ripley's Believe It or Not Museum? I don't look 80, other than my gray hair, which people automatically just assume you're older with gray hair, even though all of you, and I'm telling you all this now, you'll have gray hair by the time you're 50. Most of you'll just be dyeing it. So I've revealed the gray. And, but if I told you I'm 80 years old, you're pretty much going to be aghast, so think about it. If I go around and I tell people I'm 80 years old, they're going to say, "My God, you're blowing Jane Fonda out of the water," because she's 87 and she looks fabulous.
She does.
She looks absolutely fabulous.
Did you watch all of Gracie and Frank or Frank?
Yes. Loved it with Lily Tomlin and her. Talk about a buddy story. And two very different women. Because you have Lily Tomlin, who's more like the hippie dippy type back from the 70s. And Jane is more the corporate sophisticated type. Yet these two personalities just meld. And they just become best of friends who's got each other's backs.
Right. And it's fascinating. And what a fun way to end our show, because it's a buddy episode. We've been talking about the 70s, 60s, and the 90s, and how they influence one another. Yeah. And then we're like, oh, we have this Bohem chic, Lily Tomlin.
And the sophisticated look of
Jane Fonda.
Yeah.
And
what a great segue to the finale there. You're so brilliant.
Oh. Must be my neuroplasticity. I'm sorry. I'm going to kill it with neuroplasticity.